I was 2 floors below the executive suite when HR called me in with a smile that didn't reach their eyes. Irene Shaw, the HR director, sat behind her polished desk like a judge ready to deliver a verdict. She accused me quietly of falsifying vendor approvals and leaking proprietary analytics. I knew exactly what this was. A setup to shield the CEO's golden nephew, Nicholas Kincaid, after his botched rollout torched a 7-figure client. "These are serious allegations, Deborah," Irene said, sliding a termination agreement toward me like it was already decided. The document had pre-printed tabs already stuck in place. I kept my hands flat on my lap, but inside I was already counting the receipts, the emails, the metadata they'd forgotten I could read like sheet music. I asked for specifics about these supposed violations. She offered only ongoing investigation and pointed to a policy handbook. Something felt wrong immediately. I glanced at the version number on the policy she cited. It was outdated by 2 revisions. They grabbed an old copy, probably hoping I wouldn't notice. "I'll need time to review this," I said calmly. Irene's smile tightened. She handed me a temporary suspension letter and suggested I clear out my desk today. I nodded and left, but my mind was already racing. They'd just picked the wrong analyst to frame. I packed my desk while eyes flickered above laptop screens throughout the office. My coffee mug clinked like a bell as I wrapped it in tissue paper. Everyone pretended to work, but I felt their curiosity burning. Some looked sympathetic. Others seemed relieved it wasn't them. I texted myself a list of artifacts I could legally access as an employee under review. My own emails, my calendar, signed approvals I authored. Each item got a code name in my notebook. Project Phoenix for the client files. Paper trail for the vendor approvals. Digital footprints for the system logs. A junior analyst from accounts payable, Josie, walked past my desk slowly. She pretended to organize papers but slipped me a whisper. "Your name appeared on a watch list last week." My stomach dropped. A watch list? Before any formal complaint existed? I thanked her quietly and continued packing. The cardboard box felt heavier than it should. But inside my head, I was organizing evidence like puzzle pieces. They thought suspending me would make me disappear quietly. Instead, I was about to become their worst nightmare. The timeline was already suspicious. Watch lists don't appear out of nowhere. Someone had been planning this for days, maybe weeks. Flashback to 2 months earlier. Nicholas leaning against the hallway wall near my cubicle, that practiced smile lighting up his face. "Hey Deborah, need a quick look at your sandbox environment. Mine's locked, and I've got a deadline." I'd refused politely. "Sorry, Nicholas. Policy says no sharing login credentials." His smile had flickered for just a moment before returning full force. "Come on, it's just for 5 minutes. I promise I won't touch anything important." But I'd held firm. Rules were rules, especially for vendor approval systems. That night, failed login alerts had pinged my phone. Someone had tried to access my account multiple times between 2 and 3 a.m. I'd reset my credentials immediately and filed a routine security ticket. Just another attempted hack, I'd thought. Now, sitting in my empty apartment, I reopened that old ticket. The IT response had been unusually quick. "Issue resolved. No further action needed." Too quick, actually. They'd closed it without investigating. I made a note in my growing dossier. Nicholas had needed my access for something urgent, enough to try breaking in when I wouldn't cooperate. The timing aligned perfectly with when the leaked files were supposedly created. On my couch with coffee and determination, I reopened the vendor invoices that supposedly bore my forged approvals. One vendor stood out immediately, Greystone Thread LLC. Nicholas had pushed hard for this company, claiming they offered unique expedited services others couldn't match. I searched state business records online. Greystone Thread was registered 6 months ago to someone named Jacob Hamilton. The address matched the apartment complex where Nicholas used to live before his promotion. The coincidence made my pulse quicken. I cross-referenced the invoices. Every Greystone Thread bill was marked as expedited processing with premium rates, nearly double normal vendor costs. The approvals all carried my electronic signature, but something felt wrong about the timestamps. I added everything to my growing dossier, labeling each piece of evidence carefully. The vendor connection was sloppy, almost embarrassingly obvious, but it was also perfect proof of corruption. if I could connect Nicholas directly to Jacob Hamilton. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor. Saw a guy in a suit taking pictures of your apartment building today. The walls were closing in, but I wasn't scared. I was getting angry. And anger, controlled properly, was a powerful fuel for justice. I drafted my first counterstrike, a formal complaint to the board audit committee, not HR. I'd learned in compliance training that the audit committee operated independently from company management. They answered directly to shareholders, not executives trying to protect their relatives. I cited exact policy sections and attached a spreadsheet of exhibits. Each piece of evidence got a reference number. Calendar invites, version histories, security logs. I requested preservation holds on everything. My tone stayed clinical and respectful throughout. The key was my request for specific data. Please preserve all system access logs for user ID UPRO 401 and MKI 302 between October 15th and November 30th. I didn't accuse anyone directly. I just asked them to look at the timestamps. I also copied outside counsel listed in our ethics policy. Now, this complaint was officially on record with independent oversight. No more quiet hallway conversations or mysterious watch lists. My email signature included my personal phone number and a note. All communications regarding this matter should be documented per corporate retention policy. I was building a paper trail they couldn't erase. Within hours, I received an automated response confirming receipt. The investigation was now out of Irene's hands and in the realm of people who actually cared about facts over politics. Irene called from a blocked number the next morning. Her voice carried a new edge. "Deborah, this escalates things unnecessarily. We could resolve this amicably if you just sign the separation agreement." I kept my voice level. That seems appropriate given the seriousness of the allegations. She stumbled slightly, probably expecting me to sound desperate or angry. "We could include a positive reference letter," she offered. "Make this whole thing go away quietly." The desperation in her voice told me everything. They needed my silence more than I needed their approval. I asked for the hash codes of the files I'd allegedly leaked. She fumbled, clearly unprepared for technical questions. "I'd need to check with IT about that." "Of course," I said calmly. "I'll wait for those details." After I hung up, my email chimed with a new calendar invite. IT scheduled maintenance laptop collection. The timing was suspicious. They wanted my laptop right after I'd requested a preservation hold. They were scrambling, making mistakes. Each desperate move gave me more evidence of their coordination. I screenshot the calendar invite and added it to my file. The metadata would show exactly when they'd created this maintenance request. At the IT handoff, I placed my laptop on the conference table and spoke clearly for anyone listening. "Please note that a legal preservation hold is active on this device per Audit Committee request AC-224-0847. The IT technician, a young guy with nervous eyes, nodded but avoided looking at me directly. I noted his badge number, IT-4429, in my notebook. My personal notebook stayed with me. Company policy allowed employees to retain personal property during investigations. As I signed the equipment transfer form, the technician glanced around nervously. At the doorway, he paused and whispered, "They told me to wipe temporary logs after imaging." I didn't feel comfortable with that. My heart jumped, but I kept my expression neutral. "Thank you for following proper procedure," I said quietly. He nodded and hurried away. This was huge. They'd specifically instructed IT to destroy evidence after copying it. That went far beyond normal maintenance. It was deliberate obstruction of the preservation hold. I immediately sent an email to the audit committee noting the conversation and the technician's badge number. I requested that all IT maintenance logs for my laptop be preserved as additional evidence. The net was tightening around them, and they didn't even realize it yet. Back home, I printed every vendor approval I'd ever signed. Real signatures, authentic timestamps, complete with IP addresses showing where each approval originated. I highlighted every policy clause I'd followed correctly. No adjectives, no emotions, just facts arranged like building blocks. Each exhibit got a sticky note with a single-sentence summary. Approval number 2847, signed from office workstation during business hours. Approval number 2851, digital signature matches biometric authentication logs. The pattern became obvious immediately. My real approvals showed consistent timing, location data, and authentication methods. But the forged approvals showed something different. Digital signatures created in the middle of the night from a workstation I'd never accessed. One approval particularly stood out. It was supposedly signed by me at 2:47 a.m. on a Sunday, but my building security badge showed I hadn't been in the office that weekend. The contradiction was glaring. I stapled each exhibit carefully, creating a chronological timeline. Anyone looking at this evidence would see the impossibility of my involvement in the forgeries. The real question was, whose credentials had been used to create those false approvals? I had a strong suspicion, but I needed the IT logs to prove it. The logs that someone had specifically tried to destroy. I met Josie from Accounts Payable at a small deli near the office. She ordered soup. I bought her lunch and asked no questions beyond small talk. After we'd eaten, she slid me a folded printout under her napkin. "This fell out of Irene's folder yesterday," she said quietly. "I thought you should see it." The paper showed a watch list with my name circled in red ink. The date stamp showed it was created 3 days before my suspension, before any formal complaint existed. The list originated from HR, not security. It included notes like pattern concerns and review pending, but no specific violations were listed. They'd marked me as a problem before they'd even decided what problem I supposedly was. "Thank you," I said simply. Josie nodded and gathered her things. "I hope everything works out," she whispered before leaving. Alone at the table, I studied the document. The timestamp metadata was still visible in the footer. This watch list was created the same day Nicholas's project had failed spectacularly with our biggest client. The timing wasn't coincidental. They'd needed a scapegoat immediately, and I'd been the convenient choice. My access to vendor systems made me the perfect fall guy for any financial irregularities they needed to hide. I composed my second memo to the audit committee. A single page with 3 precise bullet points. Timeline mismatches between alleged violations and my physical presence. Vendor conflict of interest requiring investigation. Access logs that would prove the real source of the falsified approvals. The crucial detail was my checksum secret. In every Excel template I created, I embedded a harmless verification string, a hidden signature invisible in normal use but traceable through metadata. If found in the leaked files, it would prove their exact origin point. I didn't accuse anyone directly. Instead, I invited verification, request forensic examination of file metadata to confirm source authentication. Let the evidence speak. Within hours, the audit committee scheduled initial interviews, but Irene tried to block me from attending mine with personal counsel present. Her email cited internal investigation protocols and suggested I shouldn't need legal representation for a simple clarification meeting. I forwarded her objection to outside counsel with a note. "Please advise on employee rights during internal investigations." Their response was swift and firm. "Client has absolute right to representation during any questioning that could affect employment status." The interview was scheduled for Friday morning. Irene's attempt to isolate me had backfired, creating another piece of evidence showing her intent to deprive me of due process. The interview room had glass walls and uncomfortable chairs. Outside counsel, Karina Wong, sat beside me with a legal pad and calm demeanor. The audit committee member, Andrew Masuka, asked short, direct questions. I answered with dates and exhibit numbers, never editorializing. "Did you approve vendor payments outside normal business hours?" he asked. I referenced my badge log exhibits, showing I'd never accessed the building during the timestamps in question. When they asked about Nicholas Kincaid, I kept my answers factual. Nicholas Kincaid requested access to my vendor approval system on October 18th. I declined per policy section 4.7.2. Failed login attempts occurred that night on my account. My pulse stayed steady like a metronome. I'd practiced this testimony until it was automatic. Facts, not feelings. Evidence, not accusations. Masuka made notes throughout our conversation. As we concluded, he asked one final question. "Have you ever heard of Greystone Thread LLC before this investigation?" "Yes," I replied. Nicholas Kincaid specifically requested expedited approval for their invoices, citing urgent project deadlines. Masuka's eyebrows rose slightly. After the interview, Karina seemed satisfied. They asked about Greystone before you mentioned it, she noted. Someone else already flagged that vendor. The investigation was moving faster than Irene realized. Nicholas found me in the lobby after my interview. His smile was perfectly practiced, his suit crisp and expensive. Tough week, huh, Deborah? He placed a hand on my shoulder like we were old friends sharing a moment. I'm managing, I replied neutrally. He shifted tactics, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Maybe? We both got a little sloppy with procedures lately. You know how these things go. Everyone's under pressure. I didn't respond, just watched his face. He was fishing, trying to gauge what I knew and whether I'd accept a mutual blame scenario. His confidence suggested he believed his connections would protect him. The important thing is getting past this quickly, he continued. Uncle Charles always says family sticks together during rough patches. The casual mention of his relationship to the CEO was supposed to intimidate me. But then Nicholas made a crucial mistake. I'm sure that Phoenix template thing will sort itself out once IT explains the version conflicts. He mentioned a file name I'd never said aloud, one from my coded evidence list. My expression didn't change, but internally I was celebrating. He'd just revealed he'd seen my private files. That slip would be my smoking gun when the forensic analysis finished. 3 days later, IT completed their forensic analysis of the preserved systems. The email was clinical and devastating. Checksum string identified in 3 production files created 2:14 a.m., Sunday, October 22nd. Creator ID, MKI302. MKI302 was Nicholas's user account. My invisible signature had traveled from my secure templates into the falsified documents, proving definitively that he'd accessed my restricted files and used them to create the forgeries. I breathed out slowly, like letting a storm leave my chest. The timestamp aligned perfectly with the security badge logs I'd already provided. Nicholas had been in the building during a supposed maintenance window when no legitimate work would occur. But the story got better. I cross-referenced the timing with building security logs. The cameras in the executive wing had experienced a routine maintenance outage for exactly 90 minutes, covering the period when my files were accessed and modified. The maintenance contractor? A firm called SecureView Solutions, which Irene had used at her previous company. I added a careful footnote to my evidence file. Correlation noted, further investigation recommended. The invisible threads connecting all the players were becoming visible. Nicholas had access. Irene had arranged the cover-up. Someone had orchestrated this from the beginning. I requested a meeting with building security to review the camera maintenance logs. The security chief, Tom Bradley, was a straight-arrow former police officer who took his job seriously. He showed me the work order for October 22nd. Routine maintenance, 90-minute window, he explained. But here's what's odd. The contractor billed for after-hours differential, even though the work was scheduled. I noted that detail carefully. The invoice for the camera maintenance was approved by Irene Shaw personally. Another connection in the chain. She'd arranged for the cameras to be offline exactly when Nicholas needed to access restricted systems unobserved. Tom seemed uncomfortable with the implications. In 20 years of security work, I've never seen maintenance timed so precisely with a system breach. Usually these things are coincidental, but sometimes they're not, I finished. He nodded grimly. I thanked him and added the security invoice to my growing file. The after-hours billing was particularly damning. It showed premeditation. They'd paid extra to ensure the cameras were offline during the crime. The pattern was becoming undeniable. Too many coincidences, too much coordination. This wasn't opportunistic fraud, it was a carefully planned frame job. The audit committee requested a detailed walkthrough of my checksum methodology. I explained it like teaching a computer science class. Unique string generation, invisible, embedding, tamper-evident retrieval. The process was designed to prevent exactly this kind of fraud. Andrew Masuka nodded as I demonstrated on a clean laptop. So anyone using your templates would inadvertently copy these signatures? He asked. Exactly. The strings are harmless to normal users but traceable through forensic analysis, like invisible ink under ultraviolet light. I kept my explanation simple and clear. Masuka made extensive notes. Across the table, I watched Irene's knuckles turn white as she gripped her pen. She understood the implications. My hidden signatures proved Nicholas had stolen my templates to create the forged approvals. The committee scheduled a special session with CEO Charles Beaumont. My attendance was strongly encouraged. They wanted to question the CEO directly about his nephew's access to restricted systems. After the meeting, Irene cornered me near the elevators. "This has gotten out of hand, Deborah. We could still arrange a quiet settlement." Her desperation was showing. "I'll wait for the investigation to conclude," I replied calmly. She flinched when I mentioned the preservation hold number by memory. The walls were closing in, and everyone could feel it. The special session took place in the main boardroom with Charles Beaumont at the head of the table. I sat across from him, organizing my exhibits while he used "disappointed" like punctuation in every sentence. "I'm disappointed this has escalated so far," he began. "Disappointed we couldn't resolve this internally." Each time he said it, I responded with exhibit number and a specific piece of evidence. When he asked why I'd embedded checksums in vendor templates, I answered simply, "Quality control for late-night edits and unauthorized access." His face tightened slightly. The committee chair, Karina Duncans, asked the key question. "Charles, did you disclose Nicholas Kincaid's familial relationship during his hiring and promotion processes?" The room went silent. Charles shifted uncomfortably. "Nicholas earned his position through merit," he said, avoiding the direct question. Karina made a note and moved on, but the evasion spoke volumes. Throughout the session, Charles kept glancing at his phone. His confidence was cracking as the evidence mounted. By the end, he was defensive rather than disappointed, a crucial shift in tone. I left feeling cautiously optimistic. The truth was emerging despite their attempts to bury it. Justice might actually be possible. The audit committee obtained Greystone Thread's bank records through formal consent requests. The results were devastating for Nicholas. Payments were being routed to a personal account that shared an address with his old apartment lease. The financial trail was sloppy but clear. Jacob Hamilton, the supposed owner of Greystone Thread, was transferring the inflated vendor payments directly to an account Nicholas controlled. The expedited service fees were pure profits skimmed from company funds. Individually, the vendor fraud was survivable with good lawyers and family connections. But paired with the falsified approvals bearing my forged signature, it became a federal crime. Multiple felonies spanning months of premeditated activity. The committee also requested HR's internal chat transcripts for the week I was flagged. Irene tried to claim attorney-client privilege, but internal HR communications weren't protected. The messages would show exactly how they'd coordinated my frame-up. I felt the momentum shifting decisively. Each new piece of evidence strengthened my position while weakening theirs. They'd been so confident in their plan that they'd left digital fingerprints everywhere. My phone buzzed with a text from Karina Wong. "Committee meeting tomorrow at 8 a.m. Significant developments." The end was approaching, and I could almost taste vindication. In the boardroom, a projector displayed HR's internal chat messages on the wall like evidence in a criminal trial. The conversations were damning, showing careful coordination of my downfall. Irene to her assistant, "Need talking points for pattern of behavior conversation with problem employee." Her assistant, "Which violations should we highlight?" Irene, "Loss of trust, insubordination, policy non-compliance, standard script." My name appeared as a bullet point in their strategy session. They discussed which evidence to emphasize before they'd even interviewed me. The termination packet had pre-populated tabs because they'd prepared it days in advance. I sat quietly, hands steady on a paper cup of water, while they projected my character assassination in real time. Each message revealed the calculated nature of their conspiracy. One message particularly stood out. "Pre-populated tabs for Friday meeting. Make sure signature pages are ready." This was written 2 days before my interview, proving they'd predetermined the outcome. Masuka asked Irene to explain the timeline discrepancy. She stammered about routine preparation and standard procedures, but the timestamps told the true story. They'd planned my firing before investigating any alleged wrongdoing. The evidence was overwhelming. Even Charles looked uncomfortable as his HR director's scheme unraveled in high definition. Irene trapped me near the elevators after the devastating chat log presentation. Her professional mask was slipping, revealing genuine panic underneath. "This has gotten messy, Deborah. Very messy for everyone involved." She offered a mutual separation, with a glowing reference letter and enhanced severance package. "You could land somewhere better than here," she suggested. "Fresh start, clean slate." I considered my future self listening to this moment. Would I regret taking the easy money and walking away? Or would I regret not seeing justice through to the end? "I'll wait for the findings," I said simply. The formal investigation was nearly complete, and I wanted vindication, not just compensation. She flinched when I mentioned the preservation hold by its official number, AC 2024-0847. The legal formality reminded her that this had moved far beyond her control. "Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt," she warned. I almost laughed. She was threatening me while drowning in evidence of her own misconduct. "Some foundations, once cracked, can't support the weight," I replied. Let her puzzle out that metaphor while her world collapsed around her. A legacy client called the audit committee directly with explosive information. Their account representative had received a project presentation from Nicholas labeled "Deborah's Final Analysis Confidential." My checksum signature was embedded throughout the document like a lighthouse beam. The client rep had assumed I'd led the project and complimented my thorough analysis. But I hadn't been invited to their last 3 strategy calls. Nicholas had stolen my work, branded it as his own, and used it to impress clients. The rep forwarded an email chain where Nicholas misquoted me to justify an aggressive timeline that had ultimately failed. He'd twisted my cautious recommendations into reckless promises, then blamed the resulting disaster on my inadequate risk analysis. This was the missing piece: motive. Nicholas hadn't just embezzled money through fake vendors. He'd also stolen credit for my work, while setting me up to take blame for his failures. The client testimonial provided independent verification of the timeline and my actual involvement. They'd been told I was the lead analyst, but company records showed Nicholas claiming full credit internally. The contradiction exposed his pattern of deception spanning months. This wasn't just about vendor fraud anymore. It was about systematic theft of intellectual property and deliberate sabotage of a colleague's reputation. Each new cross-reference tightened the web of evidence. The camera maintenance outage matched the exact time frame of the file creation. The vendor payments traced directly back to Nicholas's personal account. HR's internal messages preceded their supposed discovery of wrongdoing by days. I stayed quiet during the committee meetings, taking careful notes while they connected the remaining dots. My role had shifted from defendant to key witness as the investigation exposed the full scope of the conspiracy. The timeline was devastating for their defense. Every element of the frame-up showed advanced planning and coordination. The watch list, the maintenance window, the forged approvals, none of it could be explained as coincidence. Karina Duncans asked to see the policy version Irene had cited during my original suspension. When they located the document, it was indeed obsolete by 2 revisions. They'd used an outdated policy book, hoping I wouldn't notice the discrepancy. The committee chair's expression grew progressively darker as each new detail emerged. "This investigation has revealed systemic failures in oversight and integrity," she announced. "Formal recommendations will follow." I felt a surge of vindication mixed with sadness. My career had been nearly destroyed by people who should have protected it. But the truth was finally winning. Leadership hastily organized an all-hands meeting to reaffirm company values in response to growing rumors about the investigation. I stood in the crowd of employees, not on the stage, watching Charles read from a teleprompter with visible discomfort. He stumbled over a line about maintaining the highest ethical standards and lost his place briefly. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. His nephew was under investigation for ethics violations while he spoke about integrity. A brave soul in the back asked the question everyone was thinking: why is HR investigating HR? The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees as nervous laughter spread through the crowd. Charles fumbled through a non-answer about appropriate oversight and independent review processes, but his credibility was shattered. The employees could sense weakness and internal turmoil. After the meeting, my email chimed with a calendar invite. Emergency board session, Friday 7 a.m. The subject line was stark and ominous. Significant changes were coming. I walked home through the city streets, breathing clean air and feeling cautiously optimistic. The investigation had revealed more corruption than anyone expected. Justice was finally within reach. At dawn, the board convened without Charles Beaumont. I wasn't present, but news traveled fast through the building. At 8:12 a.m., an all-staff email announced his retirement effective immediately, pending smooth transition to new leadership. Nicholas's badge was deactivated at 8:20 a.m. Security escorted him from the building with his jaw tight and his perfect suit wrinkled from a sleepless night. Employees watched through office windows as he walked to his expensive car for the last time. Irene's resignation email arrived before lunch, to pursue new opportunities and spend time with family. The standard corporate euphemism for forced out in disgrace. Her departure was equally swift and final. By afternoon, the purge was complete. 3 key figures in the conspiracy were gone, their reputations destroyed by their own documented actions. The investigation had claimed everyone it touched. I received a text from Karina Wong. Committee wants to discuss your status and future role. Are you available Monday morning? The tone was warm and respectful, a stark contrast to recent interactions. The cleanup was beginning, and I sensed my role in the company's future might be very different from my past. The question was, did I want to rebuild here or start fresh somewhere else? The interim CEO, Karina Duncans, offered me something I'd never dared imagine, a chance to build my own department. The Internal Analytics Guild would report directly to the audit committee, providing independent oversight for high-risk projects. We need someone who can't be bought, threatened, or silenced, she explained. Someone who understands systems and isn't afraid to challenge authority when they see problems. The job description sounded like it was written specifically for me. I negotiated carefully, training budgets, hiring autonomy, and an ethics charter bearing my name. The position came with executive-level authority and protection from retaliation. Never again would I be vulnerable to petty office politics. One more condition, I said. Quiet restitution for the stress and reputational harm I endured. Documented, not hush money. She agreed immediately. I didn't take my old desk back. Instead, I chose a new office with windows overlooking the city and space for the team I'd built. This wasn't a return to my previous role. It was a promotion to something better. The irony was perfect. Their attempt to destroy me had created an opportunity they never intended. From the ashes of their conspiracy, I was rising stronger than before. Weeks later, I walked past the glass conference room where my nightmare began. I ran my fingers along the cool frame and thought of every employee who'd sat at similar tables, being told they were the problem when they were actually the solution. I left a laminated card on the employee bulletin board. 3 simple lines about preserving your own truth through dates, documents, and calm determination. Maybe it would help the next person who found themselves wrongly accused. The new badge felt warm in my palm as I headed to my office. I wasn't returning as a survivor of their story. I was the author of my own comeback. The analysts I'd started hiring were bright, ethical, and eager to build something meaningful. My phone buzzed with a message from a former colleague. Saw the news about your promotion. Well deserved. The story was spreading through professional networks. Justice, when it finally comes, travels fast. They'd framed me to protect the CEO's nephew, never expecting my methodical approach to evidence collection. They'd built my comeback by underestimating how carefully I keep receipts. Now, I was exactly where I belonged, in a position to ensure it never happened to anyone else. The truth had won, as it always does when someone refuses to give up fighting for it.